Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Third Shield Pokemon Go PvP podcast. Guys, I am super excited because we just reached 100 subscribers after just 30 days. So thank you. Our 100 subscriber is going to get one of these amazing looking shirts. And you can get one too by sharing this podcast on Twitter. And yes, we can see if you have shared it on Twitter by the vidIQ app that we're using to keep track of how we are doing with our podcast. So guys, if you're listening or watching, please make sure to share the podcast and you get a chance to win one of our amazing shirts, hats, or even a mug and even a mouse pad. And more gifts are coming, more money prizes are coming. So guys, thank you again for supporting the podcast. We are making it better episode by episode. So today is a special episode because we have a guest that was in a tournament that I was in. It was the Forest Cup, MEGA FORREST CUP. So it was basically maxed out with the participants in the cup. And this person that I'm going to have on the podcast is actually swept the whole tournament. And guys, one other thing that is different in this episode is that we don't actually have the match where you bet $10 who is winning, who is losing. Instead, during this match, he's actually going to analyze his matches that he should have lost in this tournament. And when he actually went through it and analyzed it with me, I was like, wow, I thought I knew Pokemon Go PvP. I don't. He did a really great job, and the tactics that he used blow my mind. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that because that's going to be epic. And here's the thing. He also showed me off the camera that he created this Excel sheet and program where he keeps track of so many things of his Pokemon and the matchups and so many details. And I'm just so passionate about this. And when I saw what he has done, I was like, wow, I need to turn up my game. And lastly, guys, he was able to call back his matchups literally turn by turn by his memory. And I was like, wow, he really paid attention during these games and he's focused for sure. So this is awesome. And the reason why, you just listen what he has to say and how he walks you through it, because he literally has an explanation for each individual moveset that he have used or tap and tactics that he did during these matchups. So let's hear it. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I'm super excited because you just swept the Forest Cup, the MEGA FORREST CUP. So I just wanted to thank you for being here and so excited. So want to find out how you actually did it.
Well, I'd be lying if I said there was not some luck involved. But the most important thing I would like to believe is just knowing your team like the back of your hand, or better. There's a lot of really dangerous Pokemon in this meta, that is for sure. What really stands out to me is the key importance of two Pokemon, Blaziken and Galvantula. Those are two very, very glassy but very powerful options. You need Blaziken to take out the Ferrothorn and the Galvantula often to take out the Mantine. You could use the Ferrothorn on your own team to take out a Mantine, but you may find you need it for something else as well. So, and the two of them also have a pretty interesting matchup against each other, because they both have the Blaze Kick and the Discharge, and they get those off in 12 turns each. So it's a real damage race between them. Galvantula can beat Blaziken with two shields, but you have to use a certain trick where you hold back your second charge move and just fast move attack them down, and then you're at risk of running into something like a Swampert or a Whiscash that does not care much for your Discharge or even your Bug Buzz. So, yeah, my team was pretty standard in that sense. I ran what I would consider the four big core Pokemon: your Ferrothorn, your Galvantula, Blaziken, and Mantine. And the fifth one that I did not bring would be Kingdra, because I don't like its slowness and its riskiness. of course, Mantine is also quite risky. On paper, it can beat Ferrothorn with 1 or 2 shields, but in practice, Ferrothorn is going to win essentially 100% of the time. It's just because of how bulky it is.
So how did you decide to build your team? Do you use pvpoke.com or did you run your own simulations, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I primarily used pvpoke. Little practice beforehand with some people that I know. But yeah, I kept pretty close to their recommendations because they are good ones in this cup. It's common, it seems, that when pvpoke suggests a certain Pokemon for the top spot, there's often, it seems, something wrong with it. Like it doesn't play out in reality the way you really would want it to. But in this case, for the early days, it was Ferrothorn that got ranked top. It's been moved now, but it really is a very good option in this metagame.
So let's say, just walk me through the process, because I'm pretty sure everybody who is watching right now and listening want to know how to put together a winning team. And I know, just like you said, there was some luck involved, but I mean, you still swept the tournament. And luck or no luck, the harder you try and the harder you practice, the luckier you get. That's the bottom line. So I just wanted to find out that do you have like specifics that you look for when you build your team, or when you practice? Like, how do you usually balance that? Because you can pick 6 in case people who are listening right now not familiar with the Silph Arena. You can have 6 Pokemons that you take to a tournament, and you cannot change their movesets. So once you're locked in, you're locked in. So that is why it's important that you also select, before you start the whole tournament, your actual movesets. So that's why I wanted to just a little bit talk about it, that what would be your process when you pick your team?
So, yeah, what everyone is always looking for when they're picking their team is that one magic bullet, the super anti-meta pick that will sort of overturn all of those top Pokemon that everyone is bringing. And for those who are active in Go Battle League, I'm sure you all know that's going to be something like Azumarill or Altaria or Registeel. Those major options that always show up. So after I decided to leave out Kingdra, which in retrospect I would actually change that. I would have brought it after all. I actually would have dropped Mantine because of its unreliability. I'm looking for my last 2 picks, something that will take down what I know my opponents will also be bringing. And in this case, that would be Blaziken and Galvantula. I know are going to show up a lot. You expect Ferrothorn, of course, because it's the top pick in the early days, but you have to kind of rely on your hard counters for that, which would be your Blaziken. So what you want instead is a counter for that counter. That's Blaziken, and what I picked was Swampert for my 5th slot. Swampert beats Galvantula, and it beats Blaziken fairly reliably. You have to also worry about the counter that Blaziken has, because it does so much damage. It can, in some cases, actually beat the Swampert with 2 shields. So yeah, the counter to the counter, that's what you're looking for. It works well in these relatively restricted Silph Arena metas, but in the open formats, the freestyles, it's a lot harder because there are so many things you have to worry about.
Yeah, so in that sense, what do you think? Do you think it's easier or it's harder to prepare for Go Battle League versus a Silph Arena tournament?
Oh, it's definitely, the Silph Arena is way easier than the freestyle. because you just know that your opponents are going to be bringing some things. And the Silph Arena does provide statistics once the cup officially opens, where you can go and see what people are actually bringing. And generally speaking, you're not going to be surprised. So that leads to my second anti-meta pick, the Cherrim, the Sun Sign form Cherrim, which has the unusual move of Weather Ball Fire. Not many grass types can have that fire type move. So it does very, very well against the Ferrothorn as well. Not so much against Mantine or a lot of the others, and it kind of needs lots of shields if you're going to try to go for that Solar Beam, which is the recommended move on PV Poke. But Dazzling Gleam is probably better in the overall meta. That lets you have a slightly better matchup against Blaziken if you can manage to tag them with it, because your opponent is probably not going to credit you for having the Dazzling Gleam. It's just not something you usually think about, such a large move. But you can usually guess that a grass type is going to at least have a Solar Beam. So...
And then so now that we know basically how to get prepared for a tournament like this, and then I guess it is easier a little bit just because you know what to expect versus the Wild West out there with the freestyle Go Battle League, which you have no idea what you're facing. But the question that I have, so let's say when you get matched up with an opponent, so what do you usually look for because in your mind, so what I want to find out, in your mind, do you have already a set lineup that you want to use, or you change your lineup every single time based on your opponent's 6 picks?
Yeah, this is something that will differ from person to person. And if you've played the same person multiple times, it's something you can recognize in their style. Some people will pick a single line, or at least they'll always lead with the same lead, because they just know that it's very good. But others will always change their lead no matter what. So I try to stay flexible and adaptable to not give away that sort of pattern. It's something that you have to watch yourself for, because there are people who will take advantage of it, such as myself.
Yeah, that's a good point you mentioned it, because I have faced opponents that I know exactly that they never change their lead, because that's what they practiced and that's how they know how to play and all that. And then I based on that, so many times I'm like, oh, this guy not gonna change his lead. And then every time he changes his leads, and I completely screwed up my matchup against it just because of that. So what I wanted to ask you, so let's say, so it's basically 3 matches or 2-0, and then the last one can be, doesn't really matter at that point. But the question is, so let's say if you line up against an opponent and you lose the lead really bad, and you might even lose the first match, are you going to make changes to the second and third based on that, or are you still going to try to force the same team from what you have learned, or is also based on, cases?
In my experience, it seems like players who tend to pick their 3 based on what is very strong, a single high-quality line, instead of going for the counters, they are more likely to stick to their original pick, especially if they win. But the ones who are more likely to bring a strong counter that may not be as good against their opponent's entire team, they're more likely to change their lead. But that's just my experience.
But that's a really great point, because I can 100% see that happening to all the players. And now that I'm thinking back against my matchups, that was literally happening. So I agree with you there. And the other thing,
and I also make sure to watch my opponent's shielding strategy. Some players are highly aggressive with their charged moves, and others are more conservative, or at least prudent, as I care to think of them. They will shield if there is a strong chance that there is a fast charged move coming, that is going to knock them out no matter what. So you can bait those people more effectively, but you're also more likely to lose if you end up in a bad matchup early on. Like Galvantula versus Ferrothorn in this meta. That's a matchup that Galvantula can theoretically win with 2 shields, but you really have to tag your opponent with the Bug Buzz in order to make that happen. So some players will always take the opportunity to try to gain a little advantage, expecting you to use the discharge, because otherwise you'll be too slow to get off the Bug Buzz at the end. But more than once I have won a match because they did not take that prudent course.
So do you recommend so people who would, let's say, start out now in Silph Arena, or even people who have been doing it for a while, do you recommend, what would be like the #1 recommendation that you would tell them so they could be a little bit better? If it's shielding, if it's baiting, anything like that you recommend, what would that be?
I would say it would be to watch your opponent's tendencies very closely in the first match, because they're probably going to follow that in the second and the third. And also, never give up, because you never know what's going to end up happening. You never know what they brought in their back pocket.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's so many times that happened when you're like, oh, I lost this, and then all of a sudden you actually won.
Yeah.
What I wanted to
the most incredible match, well, I would say the most incredible match that I had in this tournament was one where I led with Swampert, and my opponent had a Jumpluff and a Ferrothorn in his back pocket. And I not only won, Swampert actually beat both of those Pokemon. It was kind of incredible, reliant on an mistake on my opponent's part. But I also like to think that I played that one very well. I used a certain trick, a deliberate loss on one of my Pokemon in order to ensure that I would be able to gain enough energy to pull it off in the end. And I also used that in the first match of the final battle, deliberately fainting with a certain Pokemon when I could have taken out my opponent in order to ensure that my final Pokemon had enough energy to defeat a rather unfortunate final matchup. Blaziken versus Whiscash. 2 blast burns. That's all it took.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I feel like that lots of people are just focusing on a Pokemon that's front of them, versus you just said that you're planning ahead and using the current one to basically set up the next one for a sweep or just to close up the matchup, right?
This is a perfect example of the kind of situation where you really have to never give up no matter what. Because not only will this Swampert survive to the end of the battle, it will be the one that defeats the Jumpluff and also the Ferrothorn my opponent has in his back pocket. And if that's not incredible to you, you really need to study more. So what my opponent is going to do is he's going to make a pretty major mistake with his first switch, because Jumpluff against the Blaziken that I am switching in is not that bad of a match, it turns out. Blaziken can resist the Bullet Seed, but it falls pretty quickly to the Aerial Ace, as you might expect. But once he brings in his Blaziken and doesn't shield my first Blaze Kick, he pretty much sealed his fate for the entire battle. Blaziken is so glassy that even with a resisted hit against a relatively weak move like Blaze Kick, it takes ruinous damage. And you'll see that he faints before he can even get his first charge move off. That gives me the breathing room that I really need to hopefully turn this thing around. So after this, I bring in my Ferrothorn in order to have a better matchup against his Jumpluff. Even though I'm at a shield deficit at this point, Ferrothorn's Flash Cannon can be quite effective against a Pokemon like Jumpluff. It has a lot of power behind it, even though Ferrothorn is not the most offensively powerful Pokemon. That 65 energy move, they tend to be pretty strong. Not always, but usually. So he's going to bring his own Ferrothorn in, and we're going to have a bit of a slugging match here. And at the end of it, I'm going to use a certain tactic that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to deliberately lose. Losing in this situation is not that bad of an idea, because Blaziken is going to come back in, it's going to get some more energy, and that's going to let it finish off the Jumpluff with a little luck. So you'll see that right at the very end, I start to tap my charged move, the Flash Cannon, to finish off my opponent. That's because he's taking a little too long for my taste to attack me. I'm thinking that he's probably trying to build up enough energy to get 2 Power Whips off, because Ferrothorn can do that. It only takes 8 Bullet Seeds to get to full energy and use 2 Power Whips in a row, and you don't want that to happen when you're this far behind. But fortunately for me, I don't have to abandon my plan after all. Right as I start to tap my charge move, that's when he uses his and he gets his off first. I'm pretty sure it's because we were out of sync in terms of our Bullet Seeds, because my Ferrothorn's attack stat is fairly high. So in comes the Jumpluff again, and I have to pull off a good move in order to overcome this shield deficit that I'm experiencing. I do manage to get off 2 Blaze Kicks, burn through his shields. Then I'm waiting to see what charge move he's going to use. If he is going to hold off and build up more energy to take on my Swampert, then I'm in trouble. But since I switched in at just the right moment, I do manage to catch the aerial ace that he was going to use to finish off my Blaziken. And Swampert takes that no problem. And after that, that is when the really magical thing happens. I mean, knowing these matchups, you can see how it's going to end. But even still, seeing a double Grass Weak Pokemon take out 2 grass types in a row using its Hydro Cannon because they have been so weakened by the pounding they've been taking so far, that puts a smile on my face, to be sure. So this second battle is my first against an opponent named Qatavin. And important to note, this guy apparently never played in a Silph Arena tournament before, but he made it all the way to the finals with 5 wins. So keep that in mind too. Anyone can, if they're prepared enough, make it all the way to the top. It's just a little luck and the preparation. So this battle opens with my very strong Ferrothorn, which is typically going to be doing very well as a lead in most matchups. But he has brought his own unusual pick to the match. That is Crustle. Crustle does beat Ferrothorn with 2 shields. So I'm going to try to tag him with my Flash Cannon early instead of charging up a little extra energy with the Power Whip. Unfortunately, he does do the very prudent thing and he does use both of his shields, so I'm going to lose that lead matchup and he's going to have a significant amount of health left over. So I do what I have to do. I let myself lose. If you're going to lose with 2 shields, the solution really is to always save one of the shields. Just like in the matchup with Mantine and Ferrothorn, you may lose if your opponent shields, But if you lose with 0 shields, the answer is just don't shield. You'll end up ahead in some way. So I have 1 shield left, he has 0, and I'm bringing in my Blaziken, which of course has the best matchup on my team against this Crustle. And I'm going to shield his Rock Slide. I do also act prudently and assume that he's going to use his stronger charge move. So after I beat his Blaziken, his Crustle, excuse me, he is going to bring the last thing I want to see him bring, his Whiscash. Whiscash, being water ground type, is going to absolutely destroy Blaziken in most matchups, also because it's so bulky. It's bulkier than Swampert. So while Swampert will sometimes feint to Blaziken's counter, Whiscash never will. And what do I have in my back pocket but Galvantula? Another very bad matchup. So I switch in my Galvantula just to hope against hope that something good is going to happen. And something good does. He brings in his Ferrothorn. He really probably would have been better off just using the Whiscash, because it's so good against both of these Pokemon. It can probably take out both of them in many cases. But perhaps because of his relative inexperience, he does make the switch, and he brings in his Ferrothorn, which Galvantula should not beat with 0 shields. So I don't try. I do tag it with a Bug Buzz, but then I also let my Galvantula feint. It could have won. I did have the Discharge charged up, so I could have knocked out his Ferrothorn, but once again, I want my Blaziken to come in, I want it to gain as much energy as possible. And once again, an incredible photo finish. I managed to get off a Blast Burn, he tags my Blaziken with a Mud Bomb, and that leaves it with just a tiny sliver of health. Maybe 1 or 2 Mud Shots will finish it off. But because I made sure to lose the previous matchup, I have just enough energy to get to a second Blast Burn, and that is enough to take out Whiscash. Wow, what an ending. So this is an example of why you kind of still want the Blast Burn on your Blaziken instead of the Stone Edge that is recommended. A lot of people did use Stone Edge. I suspect they used their elite TMs to get that Stone Edge on it. But sometimes there's just something to be said for the pure power of a move like Blast Burn. So Stone Edge would not have saved me in that situation, I'm nearly 100% certain. Although Brave Bird would have, and a couple people did bring Brave Bird instead. So, you know, there's options. And speaking of which, when it comes to Galvantula and those Mud Boys, the Whiscash and the Swampert, sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't have brought Energy Ball instead. Because the Bug Buzz did serve me very well against the Ferrothorn. But the Energy Ball, that's one of those magic bullets. It will take out any Mud Boy in a single hit, maybe sometimes twice over from full health.
Sorcerer's Cup, right? That's what's coming up next in Silph Arena. So what I wanted to ask you is that, are you already preparing for that?
I've mostly set aside tomorrow for it, but it looks like it's going to be another one where a lot of people are going to have a lot of the top picks already if they've been in the Silph Arena for a long time. So I'm particularly concerned about Alolan Muck, because it's another one of those where it's quite fast, or the power of its moves, that is. But it also seems like it's something that everyone is going to expect very, very hard. And there's going to be, I think, Toxicroak just everywhere. There was one of the older metas where Toxicroak was essentially an essential pick because of certain matchups that, let's see, what one was that? I think it was Twilight. But Toxicroak, that's another weird one. It's not quite as glassy as your Blaziken or Galvantula, and its unique typing makes it really unusual. So even though its stats are not the best, it really is perennial. So everyone is going to have a great one of those. So if you can find a way to reliably defeat the Toxicroak, you're in good shape overall. That is probably going to be the main pick of concern.
Got it. So something that's basically counters the counter, which is technically a Toxicroak. The good point.
Right.
And do you have a team in mind already, or not yet?
Not yet. I'm still waiting on well, I'm waiting to see if the rankings are going to shift again, as they do from time to time. So that's something to keep an eye on. What happens to be on the top of the rankings in the early days, it may change later, so you need to watch out for that. Or advice, if nothing else.
I did want to ask you about one Pokemon that is not out yet with its new moveset, but it's about to be out for the Sorcerer Cup, which is Beedri, right? That's how I say it. So
Yes.
Do you have any opinion on it? That should people wait out on it and enter the tournament once they have one, or you think it's not as essential for this cup?
Well, Beedrill could potentially do something against Toxicroak, it would seem, but I wouldn't count on it alone. Definitely not. Beedrill is another one of those extremely glassy ones. I've used one in the past, and just as a generalist, it really is not all there, unless you can manage to tag your opponent with the Sludge Bomb. More than once I've taken out a Charizard essentially from full health with Beedrill because it has the Poison Jab and the Sludge Bomb that you can get in there. But it's something you really, really have to test hard, and I'm probably going to be looking for something else. Toxicroak counter, if I can find it effectively.
Okay, that's good to know. I was just wondering because, I think, when is it coming out? There is a community day around it, so that's how I was wondering if people should see it.
Yeah, that's not for a couple weeks, I believe.
So what I also wanted to find out, is there any last-minute tips or any tips that you would want to give to anybody in Go Battle League or anyone in Silph Arena just to help them?
I would reiterate what I said before about the one magic bullet. I've got one myself that I'm considering trying out today, something that may actually, if it works, do a lot to alleviate my Go Battle League woes. We'll see how that goes. But it's something that I have never seen any opponent ever use. But it's something that will make Stunfisk cry for mercy. This is a Pokemon, which I will not name, but it can beat Stunfisk with 100 energy stored up. It will still win with equal shields. So Pokemon like that are out there. You just need to find them and test them out to be sure. Don't just throw them in your team without trying them out beforehand.
That's good to know. I can't wait to see it, and hopefully I will find out pretty soon so I can test it out as well. Thank you so much, for sharing it. And then, are you on Twitter? Can people find you there?
No, I do not tweet. I'm not much of a social media butterfly, but I am very active on my Discord community. And if people are on the Go Stadium Discord server, then they will be able to find me there. I'm active from time to time in discussions and such.
Cool, thank you. So you'd recommend they could get in touch with you on Discord, correct? On Go Stadium and then basically the tournaments.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you so much. I really appreciate doing this, and congratulations on sweeping the tournament, because I have seen so many content creators that have said that this tournament is not for them, and then they said they got unlucky or it was just really hard and all that. So I appreciate you sharing how you actually swept the tournament, and then, you know, all the tactics that you have used, because everything you have mentioned is very useful that so many people have not thought about. So it's really cool that you shared it with our audience, and I cannot wait to see how you do in the next cup.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I thank you so much again for the love you guys have been giving us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and here on YouTube. Please comment below what you would like to see or who you would like to see as guest on the podcast. We would love to hear who you want, but the next guest is actually Lyndon Ryu himself. So I'm super excited to have him, and then we have an amazing lineup for the rest of June, already all booked out. So guys, suggest some of your guests that you want to have on the podcast for July, because we want to have the best of the best, and who is better to suggest our guest than you? So thank you again. Please like, please comment, and see you guys next Wednesday.